Delighted on this episode. That's right. That's right. To be talking once more with creator, Dr. May I say Dr. Donald Simpson?
You just call me Don.
All right. All right. Uh,
There were a
Delighted to have
few.
you on, Donald.
Let me tell you a story. There were a few of my old cartooning cronies when I got my PhD. They would snidely start calling me Doctor Don, all this kind of stuff,
Hmm.
and it was getting on my nerves a little bit. But after a while, I've gotten used to it. So
Yeah.
when you have a
Yeah.
class with young students and they're earnestly, Dr. Simpson, what do you think about world
Hmm.
events? Well, let me
That's
tell
right.
you.
Hmm.
So I've gotten used to it.
Yeah. What is your PhD in?
I went back to school for art and architectural history,
Love it.
and I taught it for a while, and I taught basic writing and business communication and other things at different schools for about 12 years. I taught, but I went back to school because after 9/11, I went back to school searching for answers to my philosophical questions about civilization and so forth. So, and I answered every single question that I had.
And now all has been revealed to you.
Now, now I'm dispensing wisdom and knowledge.
That's right. That is how that is done. I have a PhD in education and literacy is the area, so we are the two of us a
We're all a
paradox.
couple of old academics with comics as a hobby. You could say,
Absolutely. Well, yeah, and I use them in class anytime I can to direct readers toward the graphic novel and the comic and whatever you want to call them.
well, this thing feels like, man, this thing like feels like a textbook. I mean, this is like,
That is
like
quite
kids
considerable.
walking
Yeah.
around on campus. They should be studying. They should be studying this as their Bible.
Yeah.
So,
What
what do you
does it
want to
feel like
talk
to have
about?
that? Well, I was going to ask what it feels like to have that kind of compendium out of your work. That's an impressive tome.
Yeah, and we've got this is volume one of the complete Megaton Man universe, and I call it the universe because volume two will be Bizarre Heroes. If you recall, in the '90s, I self-published a series called Bizarre Heroes,
Hmm.
which I had Megaton Man as a guest star at the beginning, and then I moved on to these other characters that I had created. A lot of them I'd created in junior high school. But inevitably, Megaton Man and the cast of Megaton Man took over. So
Well,
Bizarre Heroes just became a more expanded um, Megaton Man universe. So putting them all together into two volumes. And we're planning a couple things beyond that. So I have a complete graphic novel that I plan to. I'm in the midst of coloring a 160-page graphic novel, so there will be a couple of shorter volumes after volume two. First volume is over 500, 600 pages. Volume
mhm.
two will be even like 50 pages more than that, and it will include the Savage Dragon Megaton Man team, among other things. So yeah, it's
Nice.
chock full of goodies, and I tried to give a historical overview, at least from my perspective. In the afterword, we had Bill Morrison wrote an intro, and Chris Ecker from Big Bang Comics wrote a foreword, or maybe it's vice versa. Maybe Bill wrote the foreword and Chris wrote the intro. I'll have to check on that. And then I wrote this long afterword of just how I got into comics
Yeah.
and what went wrong after that, and why there aren't more kitchen sink comics, more kitchen sink Megaton Man comics, and so forth. But yeah, I've tried to. Um, I don't know if this will reach a new generation of fans because it's kind of a high ticket item, but hopefully, for the record, it exists and people can refer to it and get the facts.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I scanned it mostly from original artwork that I had. I'd scanned it over 2 years ago. So,
Very much like a testament.
textbook.
Oh yeah, yeah. Um, I imagine even just collecting, scanning, compiling that had to be quite the endeavor.
Yeah, and I started it. I was thinking of reissuing my own comics, maybe 100-page chunks, smaller
Mm.
paperbacks. And for some reason, I was chatting about this online, and Gary Groth had done uh, Pictopia, the Alan Moore 13-page comic I did, and then we went ahead and did this X amount of comics, which was my satirical ending to Alan Moore's, I guess you could call it ill-fated series for Image called 1963 with Steve Bissette and Rick Veitch. And
Hmm.
so that Fantagraphics Underground publication 2023. And then he wanted to publish the complete Megaton Man. And so far, so good. Um, I don't know if we're burning up the sales charts quite yet, but it's real and it's there.
I enjoyed the afterword quite a bit, and it sounds like you've always been a person who has these larger philosophical questions. I wasn't aware fully of the kind of background that you had for Megaton Man, but talking about the era that the character sprung from was really interesting to hear about.
Yes, 40 years. And that's kind of the perfect timing of this, even though I was hoping this would be out about a year ago. But perfect timing in the sense of 40 years, uh, December 1984 is when the first issue of Megaton Man came out. And originally, I had just thought of it as a one shot. I had never done a comic book before, and I was trying to write, draw, letter, ink, design logos, the whole thing. And really, I considered it a masterpiece in the old sense of the term, which is you prove your mastery with
Mhm.
a given work of art. Um, painters, excuse me, painters who had come up through the apprentice system in the Renaissance, let's say, would do a canvas. It might not be the most moving work of art, but technically it showed that they knew what they were doing and so forth. And that's what I was going for. Was I was trying to show people that I could letter, and I had some knowledge of comics history, and I could ink a little like Neil Adams and Ape Kirby and this and that. And I was hoping, really my hope was to maybe get an offer to come and work in a production department at some publisher, doing lettering and fix-ups and stuff. I didn't expect that the book would actually be published. I had sent it to Eclipse Comics. Sorry about the cough.
Oh, no worries, no worries.
I sent it to Eclipse Comics early on, maybe 14 pages or something like that, half the comic book, and got a pleasant rejection letter. In fact, Dean Mullaney sent me a Don McGregor script to try out, and it was some female assassin from the Saber series, the Galassi. It's kind of a spin-off. and
Mhm.
just as a trout. And I couldn't make head or tail out of what was going on in this continuity. So I kind of let that slip. I kept working, sent it to Fantagraphics, and I got a rejection letter from Gary Groth. In fact, I got two because I sent it about half completed. It took me 13 months to finish the first issue. I was washing dishes in a restaurant and other odd jobs in Midtown Detroit. And I sent it back to Fantagraphics when I had a complete issue, and he found it trite, and I think I still have the rejection letter, which I've posted online. Something about how you're parodying Marvel and DC, but they're parodying themselves with everything they publish. So it's kind of a redundant point. But Gary and I have worked over the years. We did King Kong later. We did In Pictopia, which was that would have been '87. Um, Alan Moore had written a script for Anything Goes, which was a fundraising series for Fantagraphics. They had legal bills because Michael Fleischer was suing them for libel, and it was a costly endeavor to defend themselves, which they eventually prevailed. They put out a series called Anything Goes, and so I was asked to do an 8-page story with Alan Moore for free. I was not the first choice of artist, and the original title was In Fictopia. And the first thing I did was I expanded it to 13 pages because it was so dense and it was so rich in detail. And I changed the title to In Pictopia to make it more visual. I figured if Alan complained, I'd met him at that point once in '85. So he was aware of who I was. He had actually read Megaton Man and so forth. So he was aware who I was. But I was not the first choice of artist. I think they were going to have Gary Quappish or somebody do it. I don't know if you remember that name. He later went on to Conan, various Conan
Mhm.
projects at Marvel. Um, then I drafted Pete Poplawski and Mike Kazala to do pencil certain sequences in Pictopia because it's like it's a world of cartoon, comic strips, animation, um, traditional 1910 comic strips all the way to the present day. Buster Brown, I think, makes an appearance, and KO from Frank Willard's strip, Moon Mullins, all these
Mhm. Mhm.
strips. So I was at Kitchen Sink Press at the time, and Pete Poplawski knew everything about the history of comics, so it was easy for him to draw this barroom scene where all these dejected old characters are hanging out. And so I worked with Gary on that. Got to know them, and then later King Kong. And there was a young editor there at Fantagraphics for a while named Tom Powers, who's different from. There's a Tom Powers involved in Multimensions, who's a different person. He's a Dr. Tom Powers. We'll get to
Mhm.
that in a moment. But I sent the young Tom uh, 14 pages of Wendy Whitebread, which Kitchen Sink had turned down. And it was penciled and lettered. And it was sitting in a file drawer for a couple of years. And then the King Kong thing happened. And right away, Fantagraphics said told me they were starting an erotic comics line, Eros Comics. And
Mhm.
could I finish up Wendy Whitebread? So I did, and I did a few of those. I did Forbidden Frankenstein and Wendy Whitebread and so forth. And so over the years, Gary, I've gotten to know Fantagraphics. I lived out in the valley of Los Angeles. I lived in Van Nuys for about 5 months. Um, Fantagraphics was not too far away. They were in Thousand Oaks. So, and they were the only people who would cash my checks from Kitchen Sink Press because I couldn't get a bank account in California. I moved out there. It was a really kind of a rough time, but I thought, I'm making money from the black and white boom because Border Worlds was selling really well. I thought, well, I'm going to
Hmm.
move to LA and I'm going to become a superstar. And I didn't have a credit card, so I couldn't open a bank account. I couldn't do this. I couldn't do that. The cost of living just killed me, and so I moved back east. But I got to know Fantagraphics because they were kind of the local satellite. I was in the orbit of those guys, and I remember different gatherings over at they rented a house in Thousand Oaks, and Kim Thompson was the co-publisher. The late Kim Thompson was still alive, and Mark Wade. I can still
Oh yeah.
remember Mark
Hmm.
Wade working. He was the editor of Amazing Heroes, or some associate editor, and I can remember him playing pool. There was a pool table set up in the garage of the house, which was also the warehouse, and then there were the production offices, which was like the living room and so forth. So I got to know the Fantagraphics crew after living in Wisconsin for a year and hanging out at Kitchen Sink Press. Then I did the same thing in Los Angeles, and then I finally moved back east. I'd started in Detroit, Wisconsin, Van Nuys, back to Pittsburgh, where I had a lot of relatives, and I've been in this area ever since. But uh, Gary and I guess, have always been friendly when we're not feuding about something in the
Hmm.
letters pages
Hmm.
of the Buyer's Guide or something like that. All these forgotten, lost publications. Um, and for some reason, he was always fond of In Pictopia, and he wanted to reprint that a couple years ago, and then he wanted to do the X amount of comics. He's asking me, "Do you have a publisher for this?" No, I'm just
Hmm.
posting pages just to rankle people. Steve Bissett loved it. I did fuck Alan Moore. I penciled this cover, and Steve just loved it. And so Gary says, "Hey, do you got a publisher for this? I'll do it." So, and now we're doing the complete Megaton Man Volume 1 and 2. Hopefully, there will be um, pretty much everything up to date, all of the Megaton Man material, which is, as I said, is probably a couple more shorter volumes after the first two. The first two will be college level textbooks,
Hmm.
backbreaking book bag material for tomorrow's student of the art form. And then that leads us up to Multimensions, which I
Hmm.
did not
Hmm.
want. I did not plan to have that come out at exactly the same time as the first volume of the complete Megaton Man universe, but that's just the way it happened, and I'm glad at least that they are real.
Yeah.
And most everybody is getting their copies. Fulfillment, I'm finding, is the big challenge in crowdfunding.
Yeah.
So we have some room for improvement in promptness. We have Eli Schwab has been really supportive of the Multimensions project. We can certainly talk about that, but he's
Hmm.
had several. He doesn't have the infrastructure that even Kitchen Sink had 40 years ago, which was only 4 people, full-time employees. Fantagraphics had more like a dozen.
Hmm.
Um, Eli is basically Eli with a few people that he calls hot dials, speed dials. So Rick Lopez has been over there cranking out uh, packages, and um, you have to get tubes to mail the posters. All these crowdfunders
Oh.
are very complicated. I'm very happy that Cosmic Lion handled this because I didn't want to go into crowdfunding as a newbie at this point. It's become so complicated, and there's so many ways to miscalculate. So I think on the whole we've done a very good job, and but I've made a lot of notes for next time. So there's room for improvement. And I miss the old days when, you'd print, when I was self-publishing in the 90s, you would print up in Montreal at Quebecor, used to be known as Ronald's. Everybody was up there, and they would just take things, truck them down across the state line to Plattsburgh, New York, and then from there they would go across the country. But we don't really have a distribution network at all anymore. We have all these, mail order kind of outfits. I don't know if, anybody does deliveries directly in the old days. Like
Yeah.
it was just a lot. There were certain efficiencies that I can appreciate now that they're
Mhm.
gone, never to return.
Yeah, yeah. I've met Eli, and he's been on the show, and he and I have also done a panel together. So great to build these networks and get the work out there with crowdfunding being such a viable thing now.
Yes, and I agree. You won't get an argument from me. Big fan of Eli. I just saw Eli at the Comics Crossroads Columbus,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
so it's been weird because I've got these two books, and CXC is an example of this. So Eric Reynolds was there with a small table of Fantagraphics products. So he brought Megaton Man, and Charles Burns was there as a guest. So there was a lot of Charles Burns. There was Carol Carol Tyler. Um,
Mhm. Mhm.
and so I did an hour sitting at the. I just drove. It's within driving distance, so I drove and just spent the day at Columbus, Ohio, and I did an hour signing and this stack of hardcovers, and then I moved over to Cosmic Lion's Table, which again is another stack of different ones. So it's been strange. I didn't want the two things to compete necessarily
Mhm.
because I I do have a devoted following, and I'm very very happy that these are funded and become real. But um, at the same time, one $50 book in a year would be a lot to ask from fans. There's a soft cover and a hardcover of each. Uh, I think the complete is like 60, and then the hardcover was 80 through Zoop. Um,
Mhm.
but I mean, something in that ballpark, a $50, $75 book, that would be plenty for 1 year. But to have two at the same time is a little bit taxing on my small following. So they came through, and you know many people supported us, and especially in these uncertain times, it's we weren't sure if tariffs were going to affect us because we were printing over in China. I think two different printers. I mean, for each book was printed separately. But so there was a lot of nail biting all the way through the line, all the way down the line for about the last year and a half. It's just been suspense and a tightrope act, and whatever other analogy you want to throw in.
Yeah, yeah. How did the Multimensions project come to be? What were you hoping to accomplish with that?
Well, Cosmic Lion had um, put out a project called Big Big Bang, and I
Mhm.
mentioned
Mhm.
Chris Edgar. I had actually done some. I knew Gary Carlson and Chris Ecker from right at the beginning because they were doing a book called Megaton. At least Gary was publishing an anthology called Megaton in Chicago, and we didn't know about this. I had already. signed a contract with Kitchen, and one day, I don't know if he faxed me. I think he sent me a letter. He said, "Look at this. This this book had just come out called Megaton. Megaton was the lead character, but it was an anthology of different things. And early Eric Larson can be found in this publication and so forth. So um, we weren't sure what was going to happen with that. So Dennis contacted Gary Carlson, and he had actually Gary had actually sought some advice from Dennis, and luckily Gary had no problem with Megaton Man. The didn't feel that there would be any market confusion, and so we just went with it. And we're very lucky for that. Chris Ecker was at the time he was a manager at Moondogs in Chicago. There was a retail chain called Moondogs. Gary Colabano, and Chris had seen a photocopy of the first issue of Megaton Man, so he's one of the first people to provide us with a blurb saying that this is great. If you love Not Brandak, you'll love this kind of thing. So we had a good pull quote from Gary or from Chris, and then I got to know these guys because Wisconsin is not too far from Chicago. It's like about a 4-hour drive from Princeton down to Chicago. I would do some of the mini cons, and I got to know Chris. Chris was doing Eben for Now Comics and so forth. And I got to know Gary over the years. And then when they started Big Bang, I inked a couple of Chris's um, early stories I think for Ultiman, and maybe a Night Watchman. And we had been talking about doing a Megaton Man Night Watchman team up since maybe 2012. We talked about doing, and I was teaching at the time, and our schedules didn't permit us to really devote to a full one shot team up like the Savage Dragon or Normal Man or something. So we just talked and we just let it drop. But this young fellow out in Los Angeles had an idea to do he was a podcaster and wanted to get into publishing, and he proposed doing what he called a Frank Miller Presents. Now, I don't even know, I've never even seen Frank Miller Presents, but the idea was that it would be an anthology of my characters interpreted by other younger indie cartoonists, and
Hmm.
do a crowdfunder and so forth. And my problem with that was this person hadn't published anything. Well, next thing I know, he turns around and he's in touch with Eli at Cosmic Lion, and they're putting together Big Bang, which is the same idea, only they got permission from Gary and Chris to do interpretations of their characters. So this anthology appeared, and I ended up being in that courtesy of a pinup that I had done back in 1985. I had drawn Megaton Man and Megaton. Not a really great drawing, but it appeared in one of the issues of Megaton in black and white, and this was recolored. And then I got my copy in the mail, and I thought, oh, okay, well, this is kind of real now. I'm not an early adopter,
Hmm.
so I guess this guy's for real. And I said, well, I guess it's too late to do my book. He's, oh no, let's do yours next. So we started down that path. 5 weeks into it, he decided he didn't want to be a part of it anymore. So I think the thing that the wise thing that Chris and Gary did was that they just kind of gave their permission to to Cosmic Lion for Big Big Bang, and then they just step back, wash their hands of it, do whatever you
Hmm.
want. And I was involved. They wanted me to do a cover, they wanted me to do a framing sequence, and so forth. And the problem with that was that people were kind of coming to me and asking me about, how does your character talk, and was this something that they would say, and what do you think of this idea and that idea? So people were running their ideas by me and cutting out the editor. So
Hmm.
the editor got frustrated and was gone. And so then uh, I had, maybe half a dozen people who were geared up to contribute and do 2 and 3 page stories, some cases 5 page stories. Um, I had gotten permission from Chris. I said, why don't you let me I'll do this team up idea, but it'll be very compressed. So I went ahead and did the Night Watchman Megaton Man team up, the crossover that we had been talking about for 12 years. And so all these things were cooking, but we didn't have anybody to put this all together. But Eli stood by me, and I put together an editorial advisory board
Hmm.
because I didn't want to just be relying on my own taste or discretion. And mostly I needed somebody just to let off steam and bounce ideas off of. So several of my contributors, um, Joe Ely Corrales, Amanda Stella Powers, Dr. Tom Powers, different person, um, Isaac Fisher, and Steve Raplogel, who's a retired school teacher up in the Northwest. We would meet on Zoom like this, and we would talk. Who do we want to go after? Who do we want to? What do you think of this story? What do you think of that story? And so early 2024, I had nothing better to do than to become the editor in chief of my own honorary anthology, where like let's honor Don Simpson for his wonderful creations. But Eli stood by me, as I said, and then of course the Ed Piskor tragedy took place. There was like 5 months there where I was just in a fog. Didn't really think much about. I was doing commissions and shows, and I wasn't thinking much about Multimensions. Um, the funny thing, by the way, parenthetically, is that I've taught people this new word, multimensions, and
Hmm.
nobody said that is the stupidest thing I've ever heard of. Nobody said
Not at
that.
all.
I think it's kind of half baked, but I've taught people a new word, and they seem to be going along with it. But then in the middle of the summer, this would have been a year ago, things started coming in. I had several people who were working on these different stories, and they started sending me files. And so I
Hmm.
put it all together into a PDF, and I sent it out to everybody. I said, "Here's where we're at." Some stories were in the sketch stage, some stories were in the pencil stage, some stories were inked, some were already starting to be colored. I was actually like one of the worst because I was, my Night Watchman story was still in pencil. I did a Captain Action team up that was still in pencil, so I had to move my ass. But everybody saw, where we are, and that became a great motivator. Everybody could see I didn't have to like crack the whip and say get your artwork in, because
Hmm.
people could just see like here's the PDF, and they go look you know uh, Alan Davis is in here. I gotta, I better not blow this, and
Hmm.
uh, Terry S. Wood and Kurt Burdick, and there were people that I was meeting at conventions, and I asked Matt Fazell and Jim Rugg at the last minute, who's one of the last people. Actually, Alan Davis was one of the last people to contribute, and uh, just to show you, I mean, we were like, he did this beautiful kind of rendition of his Excalibur
Mm-hmm.
number one cover, and he used my characters. And so there's those kind of interpretations. There's crossovers with different characters, Scott Lost's second shift characters, and so forth. And over 60 contributors, writers, artists, colorists, letterers. Ted Sikora did a bunch of lettering for me. Um, just tons of people, and they started turning the material in, and it started to snowball.
Mm-hmm.
And we were going for like, I think Big Bang had only been like 96 pages or something like that, and here we had overshot it. And I added a bunch of back matter. There's there's a glossary. This
Oh
took,
wow. Uh-huh.
I mean, I started this. I'll just list all the characters and who created who, is because a lot, a lot of people, this will be an introduction to, um, we've got Hathor created by Max Hauser. We got The Improbable Girl created by Joe Ely Corrales. I have to look this up myself. This is another textbook. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and, you know, copyright information and bios. I did, so all my collaborators have a little paragraph, and
Nice.
these were rewritten over and over again. So I had my hands full for the whole year. I was putting this together, and as I say, Eli was supportive from the beginning, and I didn't have to really, um, twist any arms or get people to turn in work. Sometimes these
Mm-hmm.
projects, there was that another project that ended up being published by Cosmic Line Productions called Giant Size 63, which is kind of the counterpart to my X amount of comics. Giant Size 63 is another elaboration on the Alan Moore, Steve Bissett, Rick Veitch
Mm-hmm.
series, Image Comics series from 1993. That was something that took like 3.5, 4 years.
Wow.
People
Yeah.
started it during the pandemic. Nobody was turning in their work. Everybody got busy, all this kind of stuff. And, uh, but I didn't have to, threaten anybody or get mean too often.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and people turned in just some fabulous work. Um, and you can cut in some graphics here to show some of your favorite pages, but they're all
Excellent.
they're all my favorites. I mean, I could I've got old friends, Robert Krause. I've got new friends, Kurt Burdick. I've got people from the '80s, Steve Bissett. I had a drawing that he made of one of my characters. And it's not just pinups. It's really, comics, stories. There's some depth to it. Oftentimes you'll get a collection like this, and I didn't want this to be like 200 pages of just Megaton Man flexing his muscles from different artists. Like, oh, that's an interesting rendering style and so forth. So I insisted on comics and at least turn it into a cover or something. So, um, some text on it. Joey Lee
Mm.
Corrales and Terry S. Wood. I ended up contributing the lettering on top of it, but we
Nice.
created a lot of faux covers, and there's a story behind it. There's a 3-page story behind it. Um, Carrie Callan did a fantastic job
Oh
with
yeah.
Slick. And again, uh, I had to design a logo to go with it, but he just did a fantastic. He took all of my Ditko inspired roof runner characters. So you've
Mm-hmm.
got You've got the black bug and you've got the blue web, and you can obviously tell what the inspiration was, but he grouped all these characters together. So there was just uh, a lot of inventiveness and creativity that I inadvertently unleashed, but I was too busy putting it together to really, really enjoy it and let it sink in. But it was hard work, but it's out there.
And now
It's in the
you
world.
can
It's
enjoy.
influencing people. People are like, "Oh my God, this is fantastic," and it's a resource for the next generation of cartoonists.
Yeah. I love your focus on, where you come from in the journey, uh, artists to come, the next generation. It sounds like as you've gone to shows, as you've connected with people, that it sounds like that's continued to be a focus for you.
Well, I was thinking of mythologizing, mythologizing myself. It's funny because I had this conversation with somebody not too long ago, but you can. I'm 63 years old, uh, coincidentally, and I just did a show. The Eddie P. Con, Ed Pisker's family puts on a convention now, and they just did their second one. And it's all younger cartoonists. There's Jim Rugg and Tom Sholey and a bunch of people who were fans of the Kayfabe channel. And so I just did a 2-day show with those folks. And um, I would say on average, they're 20, 30 years younger than me. And so they
Hmm.
have a very different frame of reference. They have even when I watched the Kayfabe channel, I would hear these stories that were told differently than what I heard, or sometimes I was there, and it's like, well, did it really happen like that? I don't quite remember. Um, but that's what happens, right? So like people are, there's a mythology, or there's the legends, there's the legacy, there's the heritage, and people want to know about the comics of the past. I was the same way 40 years ago. I was reading. I wanted to know about newspaper strips. I wanted to know about Kniff and Al Cap and George Harriman and um, Roy Crane and so forth, and as well as Kirby and Ditko and the EC period, things that I had not been around for. I was hungry to learn as much of the history as I possibly could. And the Kayfabe channel, cartoonist Kayfabe, Jim Rugg and Ed Pisker, was like that for a 21st century generation. And
Hmm.
so all of these younger cartoonists, I could, I, a few years back, I on Facebook, I posted a photograph of myself, an old photo from, and I was working on image stuff at the time. I was working on splitting image. I was working on, uh, I was lettering 1963. I had a Savage Dragon page. And so I set up my studio. I took a shot of my drawing board, and there's like on my music stand, there's a Savage Dragon. And on my drawing board, there's the 1963 house ad with the logo, the 63 logo. And there's just me, in the prime of my career. And I came across this and I scanned it and I posted it on Facebook, and I said, and I added the text that, yeah, I turned down an image partnership, and I kind of regret it, or,
Hmm.
eh. And I'm thinking to myself, anybody that knows anything would find that completely ridiculous,
Hmm.
because it couldn't be further from the truth. I was just a little sideshow that Eric Larson and Jim Valentino tolerated. Basically, they invited me to do stuff, but people are like, oh, like they believe, like, and so I got a message from one of the image founders, and it
Uh-huh.
was a cordial message, and it was very polite, but he said, we know you're kidding, but there's a lot of people out there who don't know you're kidding. So could you please cool it? Because I think Robert Kirkman or somebody was upset about something. Um, so
I bet you're
you know,
back.
you can there with great power comes great responsibility. So you got to be careful what you say. I could say, I was Will Eisner's illegitimate son or something, and then it becomes a rumor, and then it
Hmm.
becomes
Hmm.
fact. You know,
Yeah.
um, you got to be scrupulous and that's where my academic training comes in. I do have a sense of integrity, and I want to try to get things accurate, but I do have a sense of humor, and I kid around, and people sometimes think this, history and legend can be interchangeable, and
Yeah.
mythology can be the result. So,
Yeah. The sword and the stone. It was really more like butter, but it was still there was a sword there. There was something like a stone. It
there
works. It's close.
was a rusty sword sitting on the road.
That's right. That's right.
It
It just gets
was
passed
actually a
down.
battle axe. Yeah, these things tend to get exaggerated. It's like a fish story.
Yeah. Well, I am curious because we've been talking about the philosophical questions that drove you to a PhD and the questions that were surrounding your early creating. What are the questions that you're circling now, and where are you expanding your creating next?
Well, we're now, you sent me a list of questions. Is that right? That you were
Hmm.
thinking or pondering?
Hmm. Or
Uh,
did I miss any that we should make sure to include?
well, let me see. You said, all right. You said, how are you continuing to challenge yourself and enjoy your work these days?
Oh yes, yes.
Now, I guess this is a kind of a standard question you ask all the legends that you've interviewed. Uh,
Yeah, the minute.
but the premise of your question was intriguing to me. It's like
Hmm.
the, the way I read it, like comics are so easy, and I mastered them so many decades ago that now I'm just bored, silly, and I have to make invent games to keep myself interested. Like maybe I'll just maybe I'll draw with my opposite hand, or I'll ink blindfolded, just to keep it fresh and exciting and
Yes.
challenging for me, because it's so it's so easy. Um,
You get some kid from the street to come in and throw darts while you're doing it, or
yeah, there's a number of ways, but for me the challenge. I mean, if I have a new idea and I'm trying to get it on paper, the challenge is built in. I don't have to make it. I don't have to play games with myself. Oh, let's keep it
something.
interesting. Let's, uh, do something. I think if you were, I could imagine if you were maybe doing like a three-panel newspaper strip, for decade after decade, and you had only three characters and they were doing jokes every day, that you were constrained in the format somehow. You would have to do something to keep it lively. But
Hmm.
for me, I've always had it's always the challenge is built in. I want to get better. I'm trying to do things. I'm trying to get deeper with the characters. Um, the wonderful thing about Fantagraphics putting out the complete Megaton Man, and hopefully all of my 20th century comics work will will be on a bookshelf. Maybe somebody will take a picture of the bookshelf, and then they will use it as a fake background in their podcast someday. I don't
Exactly.
know. That's what I'm
It
hoping.
will happen. Yeah.
But hopefully, as that reprinting project proceeds, I'm doing new stuff. I've got all kinds of material. It is Inktober. I'm inking something else right now, um, but I've got a wealth of material to ink. This is actually for Amanda's project.
Oh,
Amanda Stella
yeah.
Powers, who was prominent in she was prominent in Multimensions, and she's made so much money from she made so much money from Multimensions. She hired me to do a short sequence for her graphic novel that she's been working on. So I'm inking that, but I have beyond that I have at least 60 pages of new Megaton Man material, and uh, it's penciled and lettered. I got to ink that. I have uh, about 16 pages are already inked. And I have scripts. I still think the funny thing is, and I'm doing these giant bookshelf editions, right? But I'm still thinking in terms of 30-page comic books like I did at Kitchen Sink Press. A
Hmm.
typical comic
Hmm.
book would be 36 pages. You have 32 pages interior, and the covers would be another 4 pages. And in some of those kitchen sink comics, um, I would do at least an average of 30, 31, 32 pages an issue because I didn't like ads. I didn't
Hmm.
like letters pages. I was, even though I was parroting Silver Age mainstream superhero comics, I was modeling myself on undergrounds and things that were commercial free, things that were ad free. So I was trying to do 32 pages on a bi-monthly schedule, excuse me. Um, and um, and I still think in 30-page increments. So I've got a new series, and you can pull up the graphic, but I'll just show you from the book. It's the Megaton Man and the Doom Defiers.
Hmm.
And that's a kind of a crunchy Megaton Man logo that I came up with. Um, and it's basically the Doom Defiers is a team of, you can see there's Cowboy Gorilla, Phantom Jungle Girl, Yarn
Hmm.
Man, Cosmic Cat, Megaton Man's in there, the whole Megaton family, XC through Girl, she's known now. And it's it's a little bit more like Bizarre Heroes in the sense that it's not just Megaton Man. There's a whole universe of characters, but it's a little more constrained to the teams. There's a team called the Doom Defiers, which is located in New Jersey, right across the river from the Statue of Liberty. I took the X amount of comics characters. They're going to be a group located in Washington D.C. and it's a little more disciplined. Bizarre Heroes in the 1990s was a little bit freewheeling and improvisational, and it was a great creative exercise. I self-published 16 issues of Bizarre Heroes. That will comprise the complete Megaton Man universe, volume two. But one of the drawbacks is that I was improvising and I never made any progress with the storyline. So this is going to be a little more dedicated to narrative and getting someplace. There are going to be flashbacks, and there's going to be the secret origins of this universe. What I've done in the 20 or 30 years since Bizarre Heroes is I've done a lot of thinking about the world of Megaton Man. I had not done any of that, as you read in the afterword of Complete Megaton Man Volume One. I just jumped in. I did a one shot Kitchen Sink Press asked me, can you do this every other month? Sure. I was 22. I didn't know what that entailed. Luckily, there was a long delay in finding. They were changing printers and trying to find an economical color printer, which was not easy. So there was like a 6 month delay from when we contracted Megaton Man #1. I had the long summer of 1984 where I was just spinning my wheels. I didn't know how to do a series. I didn't know what the next issue. I didn't have any concept of world building. And luckily, I took a walk one day. I was living in just south of the campus of Wayne State University in Midtown Detroit. I took a long walk up around the Fisher Building, the General Motors Building, like a 3 mile, 5 mile walk. Beautiful, beautiful summer day in the summer of '84, maybe closer to August, September. And I came up with the idea for the second issue. And then I just kept making it up as I went along. So I somehow eked out 10 issues out of this concept. But I had never stopped to work out the world. How does
Mhm.
this work? I assumed because I was parodying superheroes that people would get the references. I've got a character with a secret identity. He's a reporter at a major metropolitan newspaper, and then there's a team in a headquarters and on the top of a skyscraper, and then there's a mad scientist laboratory, and then there's villains, and there's evil corporations. And I didn't figure out how any of this stuff actually worked in any kind of functional way. Um, Even through Bizarre Heroes, even through the all through the 20th century, the 80s and the 90s, it wasn't until after um, the the new material that I've started, the unpublished graphic novel that I have, I'm coloring, and I moved all the characters back to Megatropolis now. They were lost. They were lost in the Midwest for a number of years, and I
Mhm.
moved them back to New Jersey. And so then I came up with this team called the Doom Defiers. And I started thinking, and this would have been about almost 10 years ago. This had been 2015, summer of 2015. So exactly 10 years ago, I started thinking about how did this world happen? Why do I call New York City Megatropolis? What's the story with that? Where are these headquarters located geographically? I just had never worked out any of the backstory or the history or even the family tree. I had a Megaton Man. I had a Silver Age Megaton Man. I had a Golden Age. And I didn't fit, I had to, I sat down and started figuring out family trees. How are people related? And I started mapping things to specific points in time. And so I figured out, and not with any desire to retcon. I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to just scrap everything and start over again with new stories. I wanted to preserve as much of the history as I could. And so I've I've come to the determination that the first issue of Megaton Man actually it was published in late 1984, but it actually takes place in 1980. There's a lot of Philip Jose Farmer influence in my thinking. He took all
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
he read all the Doc Savage novels, and he had to figure out exactly when they took place in reality, like 1935, 1936, May, June. He figures out exactly when all these adventures took place, and so I really went overboard on that. But that's what authors do. That's what science fiction authors and fantasy authors and game creators do. They figure out the world. And
Mhm.
so I figured out, well, how did this world come into existence? What was, what happened during World War II? What happened in 1980? When did Megaton Man? Because I figured that Megaton Man and the Megatropolis Quartet are originally from different universes, and so
Mhm.
they had to cross over at some point. How did these realities collide? And I've come up with some of the craziest theoretical, hypothetical backstories that you could imagine, and what I call retroactive world building. So I've done all this work, and I've uh, become extremely literal minded. Um, Somewhat at the expense of the humor, right? I mean, the humorous part of it is kind of, I mean, there's still a sense of humor to all of this. But
Mhm.
one of the things that I realized in the 1990s when I was doing Bizarre Heroes was, you know, Veitch and Bissett and Alan Moore were doing their 1963 avatars, would be the term, I guess. Big Bang Comics, they were doing their avatars of Marvel and DC, Silver Age, Golden Age comics. Kurt Busiek was doing Astro City and so forth. And I was doing Bizarre Heroes. And I had kind of come into it from a satire, making fun, spoofing, parodying, but it was this basically the same thing. And my own drawing style was becoming progressively more realistic. I was drawing certain characters pretty much as straight superheroes. The Meddler, the Phantom Jungle Girl, Ms. Megaton Man, they are normally proportioned. They're
Mhm.
not the
Mhm.
exaggerated kind of physique of Megaton Man. And so I began realizing it took a long time to get to this point, but I began realizing in the 90s that I was kind of doing something very similar to what my contemporaries were doing. They had grown up reading a bunch of comics, Marvel and DC Silver Age comics, and then they were kind of just changing the trademarks so that they could not be hearing from lawyers. So
Right.
they came up with their own. 1963 is a good example of that. You had Horus, the Egyptian god, instead of Thor, the Asgardian, the Norse god, and so forth. And you had Mystery Incorporated instead of the Fantastic Four, and you had N-Man instead of the Hulk.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
Cybernaut was the or Hypernaut was the Iron Man. Then
Mhm.
Doctor
Mhm.
Strange characters and Spider-Man characters and the Fury and so forth. And so yeah, I thought, well, it became this um, kind of generational, uh, almost a movement where you know, creators approximately my age, a little older, a little younger, we had all grown up with the universe idea, the Marvel universe, the DC universe, and so it wasn't enough just to have a title character.
Mhm. Mhm.
You had to have a whole universe and teams and evil
The
corporations.
Pantheon.
And I had already started that down that path. So I thought, oh, this is, and aside from I guess you could say the issue of humor, satire versus serious.
Mhm.
You could almost call 1963 or Astro City or Big Bang. You can call those kind of straight faced parodies. You know,
Mhm.
simulacra if you want to get intellectual, or if you want the term people use now is avatars, and people
Mhm.
kind of get that you're riffing on some archetypal Norse god or some archetypal mystical master of the supernatural, or you've got a robotic iron suit character, and you've got uh,
The
a
insectoid.
stretchy character and so forth. So it's
Hmm.
very easy to these things have be kind of these things have become these things have become kind of um, just understood tropes, and
Hmm.
I had just arrived at it in my own kind of bumbling way. I had come through the back door of doing parody and humor, and so I've had to. I still think that I retain that sense of humor, but I found that I could draw these characters, especially the supporting characters, the characters surrounding Megaton Man. There's not much you can do with Megaton Man. He's um, pretty much out there and extreme.
Hmm.
Um, there's a particular there's somewhere in here that I just as a joke. Oh, here we are. This is from 1989 from the X-Thems.
Oh
This is
yes.
what Megaton Man would look like if he were a normal superhero. So I've kind of established that, but you notice all the other characters are pretty much normally proportioned. In
Hmm.
fact, they're even I people compliment me all the time that my figure drawing is even more accurate than the industry standard. So I found that I could have supporting cast members. I can't do Yarn Man is going to be humorous no matter what. Cosmic Cat is going to be humorous. Although even Cosmic Cat I draw more like a realistic cat nowadays. Um, but so many of the supporting characters and you know most of the Bizarre Heroes characters from the 90s were could have been in a serious superhero universe. Um, there's still absurd things going on, uh, but uh, so the Phantom Jungle Girl
Hmm.
is again this my sense of humor. I think the Phantom Jungle Girl. That's got to be the craziest name that anybody's ever come up with. But but really, Batman went through his humorous phase in the
Hmm.
50s, in the early 60s. Wonder Woman is kind of silly name for a character. Superman, Hawkman, all these characters that we take very seriously now. They most of them had their humorous moments. The classic example would be in the 1950s. Dick Briefer did Frankenstein, and it started off in Prize Comics, and Frankenstein was very serious. He
Hmm.
was uh, he was a monster on the loose in America, and he was terrorizing Nazi infiltrator spies that were trying to disrupt the American war plans, the war effort. And then the publisher said, let's do Frankenstein, but make it a humorous comic book. And so Dick Briefer, same artist, overnight turned turned Frankenstein from a menacing monster horror comic into a humorous rendition. And really, that was kind of the basis of the Munsters, the TV show. They pretty much took whole cloth from those comic books in the mid to late 50s. And then humor wasn't selling as well, so let's go back to the horror version of Frankenstein. And it was again Dick Briefer, the same guy. And I thought that's always, and I picked up a number of those at shows in the 90s, and it just fascinated me that you could take the same concept and treat it so radically different. And I think that had a lot to do with, um, you know, I wasn't locked into Megaton Man being simply a buffoon all the time.
Mhm.
Maybe I could take this. Maybe he could wise up just enough to be, you know, um, and have soap opera problems with his girlfriends and his parenting partner, the Earth Mother, the see-through girl, and they have a child and so forth. And it's slowly, incrementally, gradually dawned on me that I could do more of a range of stories that could go from humor uh, to more dramatic, personal, character-driven stories. It's funny because late in my association with Kitchen Sink Press, about 1989, I think we just put out Yarn Man, and I ended up doing a couple more comics after that. I did Bizarre Heroes #1, and I put out I think I did Border Worlds Maroon #1, which was going to be the 8th issue of Border Worlds, my science fiction story. And there was an exchange of letters between me and my publisher, Dennis Kitchen, and it was a completely dysfunctional relationship by that point. Starting in 84, 1988, it was already, end of 1987, it was already on the rocks. But I continued, it was kind of the devil you know, and I continued producing material for Kitchen Sink Press, and we just put out Yarn Man. And he wrote to me, and he complained. He said, you drove me crazy. You never could make up your mind if you wanted to do humor or science fiction. You wanted to do drama. You didn't know what kind of cartoonist you wanted to be. And it's like, well, duh. I was 22, 23, 24. Besides, you're publishing Crumb, Eisner, Wally Wood, Kurtzman. Those guys did straight heartfelt stories. They did dramatic stories. They did humor. I mean, Kurtzman did frontline combat or
Mhm.
whatever it was, two fisted tales.
Mhm.
And then,
Mhm.
along with Mad Magazine, Eisner was doing graphic novels, science fiction, Signal from Space. Crumb was, ended up doing the Bible and or the Old Testament or whatever it was, the Book of Genesis or whatever it was. Um, all the cartoonists that I admired did a range of things. Wally Wood did the Outer Space Spirit that was published by Kitchen Sink, as
Mhm.
well as Super Duper Man. And it's like what did I have to make up my mind? I missed that memo where I was supposed to decide for all time that I was a humor cartoonist. And as you got from the afterward, my ambition until I came up with Megaton Man, and my ambition was to get into Heavy Metal magazine. That was kind of my post. I had outgrown Marvel Comics. I graduated high school in 1980, and I was trying to get into heavy metal because I thought that was the prestige place to
Mhm.
be. John Workman is in Multimensions. Very proud of that. Both John and his daughter Kate. Um, John Workman was the art director at Heavy Metal magazine in the 70s and 80s, late 70s and 80s, and he I got two rejection letters from John Workman back in the day, 1980, 81, thereabouts. Um, let's see if I should have this thumbnailed by now. So John Workman actually contributed a pinup of the Phantom Jungle Girl. Very proud of
Mhm.
that. His daughter, Kate, is a wonderful artist. She does, where's that? And his daughter, Kate Workman, did this wonderful
Oh,
crochet
love
yarn
it.
man chibi doll. And Amanda Stella Powers took photographs I created this 2-page text page with it. Um, but the point I wanted to make was that I was trying to get into heavy metal and back in the day, and Mobius and Enki Bilal and all the French cartoonists and Swiss cartoonists, and um, didn't make it. I think John explained they had one of. I submitted when I had Megaton Man #1. I actually sent it to 15 different publishers, and one of them was heavy metal. And I got a letter from someone who was the successor to John. He said, I've been tasked with answering all of John's unanswered mail from the last 25 years. But we can't use Megaton Man. But that to me, for at least a couple of years in the early '80s, that was kind of my aspiration, was to do science fiction graphic novels, and I got a chance to do a chunk of that with Border Worlds, but I didn't know you had to make. I didn't know you had to make up your mind if you wanted to be a satirist, or if you wanted to be a straight superhero artist, or if you wanted to be a science fiction illustrator. And I kind of
Uh,
I kind of took it as a an open uh, kind of a fielder's choice. I could try different things, especially at a company like Kitchen Sink Press. You would think, being an eclectic underground publisher that was publishing The Spirit and Steve Canyon and Harold Head and Omaha the Cat Dancer, you would think that it would be a little experimentation would be tolerated. But I ended up I just ended up stubbornly doing what I what I wanted to do.
yeah,
We
yeah.
we had done 10 issues of Megaton Man in color. I'm convinced that the only reason that Kitchen Sink Press was willing to take a chance on a 22-year-old beginner was because it seemed like a plausible color comic, and they were doing color comics with The Spirit. They ended up doing, there was Harold Head, Hitler's Cocaine in full color. Beautiful comic book,
Mhm.
but a South American adventure of a bisexual hippie rescuing Hitler's uh, opioids did not, it wasn't what the direct sales market was asking for. But Megaton Man seemed like a plausible direct sales color comic. And when the color line came to an end, we had already announced that I was going to bring the series to a close at 12 issues. We shortened that to 10 issues. And I had started doing Border Worlds as a backup. So we tried that for 7 issues in black and white. It coincided with the black and white boom and bust.
Mhm.
And I was working on different storylines with my editor Dave Schreiner, and I I was working on Border Worlds, but I found that I had more ideas for Megaton Man, um, as well as plot a plot idea that became Bizarre Heroes, and I was discussing those with my editor at Kitchen Sink Press in early '87. And when I decided, Border Worlds just wasn't going to pay my rent, it became very clear after the 7th issue. And I started doing, I had freelance work to do with DC and so forth. Luckily, I could pay my rent, but I was closer to finishing. I had more done with Megaton Man 11. I had
Mhm.
started thumbnailing it, and I had it worked out. Border Worlds #8, which was the issue that never came out, it ended up being Border Worlds Maroon #1. I only had started a few pages on that, so I was closer to having Megaton Man finished, and so I proceeded on that. And then I got into this horrible dispute about the numbering. Dennis insisted it had to have another number one, on the cover. You've been gone for half a year. You can't come expect the market to remember you and so forth. You killed you killed Border Worlds without any reason. We're still waiting for a reason. It's like, what are you talking about? I have to pay my rent. I can't I can't do this. Anyway, it got very ugly. You can read all about it in the afterword.
Mm,
Um, but I went back to college for a decade, got
mhm,
my
mhm,
PhD. I was teaching, and I had this graphic novel that I referred to a couple of times, the Return to Megatropolis. I had started in 2002. I had done the opening sequence of that, and 9/11 happened, and I set that aside. I decided to go in a different direction, go back to college, and answer these profound, burning questions that I had about art and life and so forth. And I had a wonderful education. I was older than the average student by a good stretch. I was in my 40s. I was 50 before I got my PhD. Um, and Then I came back to comics. Completed the graphic novel that I had started. And I completed the graphic novel, which is 160 pages. I'll send you a PDF so you can pull some graphics from that for this
mm,
video. But basically, I moved all my characters back to Megatropolis. They've aged. Uh, Megaton Man and the See-Through Girl have a son who's now 10 or 11 years old. There's a catastrophe in New York, um, basically on the scale of 9/11. And so they come back after years away, and all the other mega heroes in town have been depleted because of this catastrophe. And the remnants of the Megatropolis Quartet and the Devengers form the Doom Defiers. Spoiler alert. Um, and I realized that putting these characters back in New York City or Megatropolis, uh, I suddenly had all kinds of ideas.
mm,
There were characters that I hadn't used in 30 years at that point. Cosmic Cat, the Megaton Mice, the Devengers. Um, and as I said, I started to think, how does this world work? And I started family trees, and I wrote histories, and I figured out all kinds of the underpinnings of this universe. And I uh, I thought, well, what do I want to do here? Do I want to do another comic book series? Do I want to do a series of graphic novels? How do I want to present this? And I decided that I wanted more structure. I wanted, however it came out, if it was only small little increments, I still wanted it to add up to being a coherent reading experience. So I worked
mm,
all that stuff out, and I thought, well, why don't I why don't I try prose? That would
mhm,
be easy, faster, maybe faster than drawing all these doggone pages. Because I sat down in the summer of 2015. I read all my old comics and made notes, and I was a little bit surprised at how little the narrative had moved along. There were a lot of set pieces and flashbacks and funny moments, but it really, I didn't cover a tremendous amount of ground. And I thought, well, I could maybe I should try this in prose. It would be easier because by that point I was working full script, and doing detailed notes to myself and so forth. And so I tried. I am basically the author of more than 500,000 words of unpublished manuscript, which is hopefully at some point I will revise this material and make it readable and present it in some fashion. But it was really kind of an extension of this whole world building idea. And what I settled on was basically retelling the early Megaton Man stories, but from the perspective of Clarissa, Clarissa James, who becomes Ms. Megaton Man. And she's kind of the uh, perfect voice for this. And so I literally wrote 500,000 words that I posted online. And she starts out as a co-ed. She starts out as a college student. She meets the see-through girl. She learns about this world of mega heroes, and Yarn Man comes to visit. Um, Megaton Man loses his powers, and he shows up in Ann Arbor, where they're going to college, and um, she eventually becomes Ms. Megaton Man. And so I realized that there were just a lot of untold stories relating to her, to that character. And so I followed it. It was very engrossing. It's still all online. It's I've edited it, I've proofread it to some extent. It's in readable form, and I still plan to uh, give it a once over again and try to get it into print in some way. Um, it's a little late in the day for me to have a career as a uh, Stephen King or J.K. Rowling or Cassandra Clare or some other best-selling prose writer, but I found the experience really rewarding, and it enabled me to go into places with these characters. Mostly, what's interesting about it is that ever since um, basically starting in 2015 through 2019, early 2020s, the pandemic, um, and writing all this material, I'm more comfortable thinking of the characters by their first names than real names. Like, so I think of Trent Flug, I think of Trent, Stella, Bing Gloom as Yarn Man. I'm on a first. It's curious because when I was drawing the comics, I would think of them as Megaton Man, the Earth Mother, Yarn Man. Cosmic Cat is still Cosmic Cat. He doesn't have another name. He's Cosmic Cat. So I call him Cos, and he's become from being kind of a second banana character to a second banana character. He's become a major character, central character of importance, and all of these characters I've gotten to know just by virtue. I haven't continuously put out Megaton Man comics or Bizarre Hero comics for sure, but I have a long history with these characters. And there was a time when I just I was trying to live down the early success of Megaton Man. I was didn't nobody likes being typecast. And there was a time when I was like, oh, don't talk to me about Megaton Man. I'm never going to draw Megaton Man again. Leave me alone. I'm doing my science fiction thing. And that lasted for about like 15 minutes. And then the black and white bust came, and oh well, maybe I can do another Megaton Man comic. See what happens with that. So I've changed my tune and I've eaten my words several times over 40 years, but I can honestly say that I have a strong relationship with a bunch of make believe pretend characters, which is not a healthy thing, by the way. It's a pretty abnormal thing unless you can monetize it in some way. But I have all kinds of new material. As I say, I've got 60 pages to ink of just the new Doom Defiers. I've written scripts. In fact, I could probably reach over. I could grab you and show you the scripts for issues 4, 5, 6 at least. I have I have at least 10 or 12 issues of, and I'm thinking of them in 30-page increments. They
Mhm.
are much more thematically unified. To a certain extent, each issue stands alone, but they also thinking eventually they would be collected into book format. Have not announced anything for publication yet. The funny thing about the internet and social media is you post a drawing and say, I inked this today, or I penciled this today, and people say, can I order it right now? No. I have to I have to finish it and color it, and it's going to be a slower process than that. It's much more like the book industry,
Yeah.
where I don't know if you've had experience with, a manuscript takes a long time to, people like to go over it and get all the bugs worked out. So hopefully people can be patient, and hopefully I'll have a few years left to produce some work to justify the faith that people should have shown in me.
May it be so. May there be many years ahead. And I'll leave you with one more question. I know it's been a nice long chat, and I appreciate your time. I always ask, where are you going next? Where can people find you? We've mentioned social media, but I think we said Baltimore. You were talking about Baltimore before we were recording. So anything like that that you'd like to mention?
Baltimore is the kind of the last big show of the year that I'll be doing in 2025, and it's the first big show that I'll have both of my books, the Complete Megaton Man Volume One and Multimensions. So it's the old, the new, the old in black and white, the new in full color. Um,
Um,
Here they are side by side, so if you get a comparison. Um,
Yeah,
if I'm strong enough to lift them both at the same time. So
very
there's
nice, very nice. Love
the
it.
omnibus of 80s material. That's all me, with help from Bill Morrison and Chris Ecker. And this is 60 contributors. There's plenty of me in here. I did the cover, but all of these uh, artists are different. These are all different artists interpreting my characters. It's an international roster. We have the Middle East, we have the United Kingdom, we have South America, we have Texas, we have Los Angeles, we have all over the country, Canada, Trish Ellis up in Canada. Um, so it's the old and the new for right now, and hopefully that will keep people satisfied for a little while.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And I'm still
Wonderful work.
available, by the way, I'm still available for commissions. Um, I know people have spent over $100 on these books, but I am still, my bread and butter is commissions and doing shows. And I'm looking forward to a healthy Baltimore experience. Should see a lot of friends and do a lot of autographing, and hopefully sell some artwork and make my gas money back.
And if I don't see you there, I hope to see you at Heroes again next year.
Yes, Charlotte's a great show. Charlotte and Baltimore are the best comic book shows on the East Coast, the
Mhm.
biggest artist alleys and so forth, and a lot of original art collectors and so forth gravitate there. But I'm doing a lot of smaller shows and regional shows. Pittsburgh, I'm in near Pittsburgh. I'm doing a couple shows in Ohio. Akron Comic Con will be in November. Um, I get up to Michigan every once in a while. I haven't done Motor City Con in, I did one in the 90s up in Novi. That's actually pretty close to where I grew up. Um, but I get down to Charlotte. Charlotte's a great, wonderful experience. And um, Shelton puts on a great show with all his personnel. Steve Saffel and the whole staff is just really great and wonderful. So, yeah, I definitely hope to do that again in 26 and hope to see you there.
Yeah, yeah,
Thank you for
absolutely.
taking the time. Thanks
Oh,
for
my
taking the
pleasure.
time. And I'm glad I had some free brain space.
Yeah, I greatly appreciate that. And as I said, the
It
link always
cleared up.
works. So
It cleared up. I'm
yeah.
still hunting down some packages. I'm still waiting for some packages, and it's all delivery and logistics, and but I have just enough relief to have a relaxing conversation. So thank you for an enjoyable talk. Look forward to the finished edit. Look forward to
Absolutely.
seeing what you cut pictures you cut in, and I'm sure it will be a wonderful experience.